Welcome back. In this video, I want to address the situation inside Iran after the Israeli attack on not basically their nuclear sites, though also it had several other targets. Despite the initial declarations of Secretary Rubio that the United States was not involved in the attack, which were followed by declarations that by Trump that he was on top of the crisis and that this was a negotiation tactic to force Iran into concessions, it is clear that Trump has been dragged into the conflict, and it could hardly have been any other way. So let's explore some topics here. Number one, Trump, or at least somebody in his administration, should have had it clear that his time to negotiate with Iran a nuclear deal was short. Derailing the process. Why? Because derailing the process was very easy, as Netanyahu's attack has proven it. And then you had the historical precedents. Kerry in 2014 believed he could reign on Netanyahu and instead was dragged by him into pretty much unconditional support. You may remember his words with sarcasm ahead of a pinpoint operation. And then the same happened in 2024 when Biden said he was going to remind Bibi the lessons of 9/11, and they ended up turning him into Julius Caesar with military victories in Lebanon, Syria, and attacks on Yemen and Iran itself. In the case of Trump, Netanyahu even invited him to participate in the attack, and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, after declaring that the United States was not involved in the attack, then candidly declared that we have shared exquisite intelligence and logistical support with the Israeli government. Due to ineptitude or duplicity, Trump lost time by starting with maximalist positions in case he was sincere about getting a nuclear deal. And this maximalist position that wasted time was that Iran had to abandon all enrichment. And from then, he moved to absurd bravado when saying that Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left. Actually, I would be surprised if Iran returns to negotiations with Trump while Trump is in power, as that would imply a humiliating capitulation that a theocracy can afford. Number two, little by little, Netanyahu is pushing for a new narrative, regime change. It's no longer the nuclear bomb that Iran was going to get in a few weeks, something that he has been repeating since 1996, a ridiculous argument that nevertheless was repeated over and over the next decades. And yes, Trump initially set a red line on Khamenei's life, but Netanyahu is used to crossing red lines. He did it constantly on humanitarian issues and on the attack on Iran or Iran's oil facilities during the Biden era. He knows that once the line is crossed, an American president will hardly have the courage to tell Netanyahu that he is on his own. And that's precisely why a war with Iran is very possible. The Iranian facilities most involved with enriching uranium above allowed civilian levels are underground, different from Natanz, which was above ground, and is mostly in the Fordo enrichment facility that can be reached without more sophisticated US weaponry. So, put aside for a moment the risk of contamination. Why is Netanyahu attacking Iran when he knows well he doesn't have the weaponry to reach underground facilities like Fordo? And why is he doing it in the name of preventing Iran from getting a nuclear bomb? That doesn't make any sense. That is creating a black hole that will drag the United States to put boots on the ground to then effectively stop Iran's nuclear program, as Israel can do that alone. Doesn't have resources enough to perform that task alone. So from the very beginning, it made no sense to attack targets for which you don't have the weapons even from a military point of view, if you don't have the weapons to neutralize those targets. Number three, as mentioned in my previous post, this is a huge blow to moderates in Iran, since it not only weakens the moderate Pezeshkian and strengthens Khamenei's theocracy and the Revolutionary Guards, but also creates a huge chance at weaponizing oil prices to increase oil prices, which, together with the distraction from the Ukrainian front and the fiscal toll on European states, makes of Putin and Netanyahu, of course, the undisputed winner of this crisis. On the other hand, it weakens the position of China inside its own yuan zone, since not responding in defense of a close ally like Iran will be taken as a sign of weakness, especially after the retreat of Belt and Road under Trump's pressure from countries like Panama. This, not to mention the effects of oil prices, especially if it causes a global recession, on Xi Jinping's struggle against with China's deflation, which would push Xi more and more to a military option that is the best, that is the scenario that benefits Putin the most. Besides, this creates new incentives for Putin to destabilize the young Syrian government, since it obstructs the direct channel to Iran that he had in times of Bashar al-Assad. Take into account that losing Iran after losing Syria is not an option for Putin, as that would hurt probably beyond a point of non-return his position in the Middle East. Moreover, the political unrest in countries like Jordan will increase as to the Palestinian crisis. King Abdullah II would have to add the new Iranian crisis, while fundamentalists use the crisis as fuel. And the Iranian regime, if cornered against the wall, will use unconventional war led by its proxies in Yemen and Lebanon, not to mention smaller groups which, regardless of their size, may create additional instability through terrorist acts. This is definitely a heavy price to pay to give Bibi a boost in the polls, although so far Bennett is still leading and the elections are in 2026. But still, it's time to start supporting Israel really and not the Likud party, especially the Bibi Netanyahu coalition that has only hurt Israel in the foreseeable future. Number four, yes, Khamenei has called to resume negotiations through Qatar, Oman, and Saudi Arabia if the Israeli attack stops. And it may well be that Khamenei doesn't want to go through the hardships Mullah Omar went through when the United States toppled the Taliban in 2001. He may have gone soft, yes, but the Iranian regime is much more complex than that. And the Islamic Revolutionary Guard is definitely fanatic enough to be willing to take the path of the Taliban took in 2001, especially the Quds Force, which specializes in intelligence and unconventional war. Therefore, even if Khamenei had gone soft, there is a network of fundamentalists who will be eager to use unconventional war against the United States and Israel, who will turn the United States into an occupation that will have similar consequences to the occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. And if that happens, it would not be surprising to see a few ships sunk in Hormuz, blocking oil tankers before the guerrilla movements began organizing along the difficult and extensive geography of Iran. And how would the Revolutionary Guard fund its war against an occupation? Well, the same way the Taliban did, with the additional benefit of having the experience of its shadow fleet avoiding the sanctions on Russia. That's why I would not bet all my tokens on that scenario, on the scenario that if you inflict a defeat, a serious defeat on Iran, or even if you get a military victory on Iran and you topple the regime, that will be the end of the war. Like in Iraq, it could be the start of the second phase of the war, the unconventional part. So, what's the best way to weaken Khamenei and the fundamentalists from the Revolutionary Guard? Giving victories to moderates like Pezeshkian, giving the Iranian people reasons to revolt if those moderates are later knocked down. And we are doing exactly the opposite. So we are pushing toward a direction that has not happened before. Well, probably in the case of Germany after World War II, but definitely an option that failed in both Afghanistan and Iraq. And yet we are making exactly the same mistakes as if those two wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, had never happened. Finally, number 5, as incompetent as the Israeli position currently led by Yair Lapid, the Democratic Party's silence endorses Trump's foreign policy, despite the risk of another war like Iraq, only bigger. At least in 2003, Democratic lawmakers used the excuse of the Powell's report that backed Bush's policy in Iraq, although the footnotes clarify the significant chances that it was based on that assessment was based on unreliable sources, but who reads the footnotes, right? In this case, it's much worse because we are relying not on something like Powell's report, but on the word of Netanyahu, a liar who since 1996 keeps saying that Iran is a few weeks from getting a nuclear bomb, and using that as an excuse is inexcusable. Either because Democrats prefer not to hurt Biden's feelings, even though it was precisely Biden's subservience to Netanyahu, which is a lot to blame for all this, or because they are afraid of abandoning their strategy of playing dead. The matter of the fact is that in 2028, many people are going to remember how they make themselves scarce when alternatives were needed, especially if Trump drags the United States to war in Iran. And having said that, let me leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news,
4. Former President Biden reported laughing after learning Trump might be using a catheter, then forgot what he was laughing about. After an X-user pointed out that President Trump might have been using a catheter in a UFC event, which might be a sign of dementia, it was reported that former President Biden reported laughing after learning that Trump might have been using a catheter. He was always calling me senile and calling me names, and then he took from me my friend Bibi, but at last God has heard my prayers and now he has dementia too. And my friend Bibi. My second term. I beat Medicare. I also beat Putin, Nancy Pelosi, and all the baddies. And was he using a catheter or diapers? Who was using diapers? Jill. What diaper brand? Was declaring Biden until Jill and Hunter Biden came up to abruptly end the press conference. Asked about the event, DNC Chair Ken Martin declared, "Now that the party has declared that David Hogg is not cool, we must focus on what matters," taking Rachel Zegler's Snow White to the first place in Disney+. Eyes on the prize. 5. Trump dozing during his military parade while Secretary Hegseth and First Lady bored, a vile libel, says Press Secretary. Press Secretary Leavitt described images showing Trump dozing and Secretary Hegseth and First Lady bored during the president's military parade as a vile libel. This is another anti-Semitic conspiracy between illegal aliens and Democrats to make President Trump look bad, but the image only shows the president resting his eyes. And the moments falsely described as Secretary Hegseth holding President Trump to prevent him from falling from his chair are nothing but Secretary Hegseth's demonstrations of trust in his leadership. Giving credibility to any image that shows President Trump in any way that is not lucid and athletic is anti-Semitic and helps illegal aliens, declared Leavitt. 6. Bored Marco Rubio caught yawning as Trump military parade attendants mocked. Secretary Little Marco will have to pay for the snub with 3 of his medals, decides Trump. Soon after Secretary Rubio returned to the Maldives, Secretary Leavitt revealed that it was true that Secretary Rubio had been caught bored and yawning during the president's military parade, and that President Trump had decided that Secretary Little Marco will have to pay for the snub with 3 of his medals. Secretary Leavitt also revealed that, after learning of the president's decision, Marco Rubio boarded his flight to the Maldives with wet eyes. Asked whether the punishment was not excessive considering that also Secretary Hegseth had been caught bored with the parade, and that there are images showing even President Trump and the First Lady dozing off for moments, Secretary Leavitt declared that those were jihadist images and that it was anti-American to give them any credibility. Also, the reporter who formulated the question was banned from future press conferences.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.